Hey everybody, I'm Mark Wallace. You might know me as a photographer and educator. You may have seen me on YouTube, on Adorama TV, or on Creative Live, maybe on F-Stoppers, something like that. But what you might not know is that I am a full-time adventure traveler, and I've been doing that for the past 11 years. In 2014, I left the United States to backpack around the world. And I traveled by boat, and car, and tuk-tuk, and train, and bus, pretty much by any means necessary to circumnavigate the globe. And during those 2 years, I was able to visit 28 countries on 5 continents. But then in 2016, I returned to the United States to trade my backpack for a motorcycle. And then I spent the next 5 years riding across every continent except Antarctica. I met fantastic people. I ate some of the most wonderful food and experienced cultures in a way that was life-changing. So 56 countries later, again, I returned to the United States to build out an overlanding rig and continue exploring the world in my Land Rover. It's been 11 years. So 11 years since I became a digital nomad. And during that time, I've filmed hundreds of YouTube videos. I've written who knows how many articles for websites and travel magazines. And I've created, tens of thousands of photographs. Pretty much photographs of everything from drone footage to scenic photography. I've done wildlife photography and street photography. I've done some documentary work. And of course, I've spent a lot of time working in studios around the world to film studio lighting videos and tutorials for my YouTube channel. So in this video, I'm going to break down some of the lessons that I've learned so that you can become a better travel photographer. Now, when we think about travel photography, it's such a broad topic. And so this video covers a lot of different things. And to help you out, I have added chapters to this video so that you can jump around to the topics that apply to you specifically. I've also included links to some of the gear and the resources and all the things I'm talking about. So make sure you take a look at the description of this video because there's a lot of extra stuff that you can click on and learn and see. But let's start by talking about the big question, and that is, what is travel photography? Well, in my view, travel photography is no different than any other type of photography. I mean, just think about it. When we're talking about photography, we're usually say something like, well, I'm doing wedding photography, or I'm a portrait headshot photographer, or I'm a fashion photographer, product photographer. And we get really specific by what we mean when we say photography. And so that specific thing determines what lenses we use, what lighting we buy, where we shoot, how we edit our images, pretty much everything. And so to me, travel photography is just photography with very specific limits and very specific goals. And I think that's where some people get off track when they're thinking in terms of travel photography. They're aware of the limits. They're aware of things like weight and space and being safe and staying on budget and time and all of those kinds of things. But what they forget to do is they forget to define their goals. They're just thinking, hey, I'm going on a trip. Let's take a bunch of pictures. And without defining your goals, you're never going to really be able to figure out what to focus on. You'll also have difficulty understanding what stuff that you need to bring and not bring. And when we do that, we usually forget to pack something, or we have so much stuff it's just really, really heavy. And I know what you're saying. You're like, hey, Mark, I just want to go and shoot a lot of different things. I want to do scenic photography and street photos, and I want to take pictures of the food we eat. And maybe if I see some wildlife, I want to take pictures of that too. That's fine. That's just totally normal. But what I suggest that you do is think through the things that you really want to photograph as you're traveling, and then make a list of those things and prioritize that list. And that's going to guide you as you approach your photography during your travels. When you have something, for example, you're at the weight limit of your carry-on bag, your camera bag, and it's you have a decision between how do I do this? Do I take my 24 to 70 or do I bring my 70 to 200? I know I can only bring one because I'm at the edge of that. So just go and look at your list. What's at the top of your priorities? Is the top of your list making photos of people and the city streets and taking photos of food? If so, then your 24 to 70 wins and that's what you pack. But if you're focused more on wildlife and looking at distant vistas and shooting mountains and trying to get some awesome compression, well, your 70 to 200 is what's going to win. Your goals will define your gear. So make sure you define your goals. That's going to define how you approach photography for your entire duration of travel. Okay, now let me give you some general guidelines. We're going to talk about gear. I promise you we're going to get into some specific gear for specific types of travel photography, wildlife photography, street photography, that kind of stuff. But what I would like to do is give you 5 lessons that I've learned from my time on the road. And I think this applies to all travel photography as well as just photography in general. So let's begin. Number 1, be flexible. Things don't always go to plan. What would happen if you had that once in a lifetime shot that you've been working on and dreaming of and saving for? You get to Machu Picchu and it's a rainstorm, or there's a flash flood and the road up the mountain is wiped out and you can't get there. What do? Or what if you're on safari, you're in Kruger National Park, you're in South Africa, you've spent all the time and money to get there, and the wildlife just isn't coming out because it's too hot or it's the rainy season or something has happened. That kind of stuff happens all the time. So make sure you do some research so you have some alternatives if you need them. And do this before you leave. For example, I rode my motorcycle down to Patagonia to southern Chile, and my plan was to photograph the stars against the Andes Mountains and create some videos about night photography and astrophotography and do some really amazing stuff. But when I got there, the sky was just covered in clouds. It was sort of rainy, and the weather forecast said it was going to be like that for the next 2 weeks. Well, I'm on the quest to find the perfect location. There's been some setbacks. The starry night photo that I wanted to shoot is not possible because, well, the weather has changed dramatically right when I was ready to start shooting at night. And so that's the first big fail. But to my advantage, I have a guide here in Patagonia. Her name is Aileen. Come in here. And so here she is.
Hi, everybody.
She has been all over the Americas on her motorcycle. It's right behind us here. And she is from Patagonia. And so she's showing me different places. So because I can't shoot the starry night and the Milky Way, the things that I wanted to shoot, Aileen has an alternative, and that is a glacier where maybe we can walk through some ice tunnels. Fortunately, I did have plan B and plan C. And so instead of doing the night photography that I wanted to do, I headed to a glacier and I photographed that. And then I hopped on this little boat and we went and visited the marble caves. And these were both locations that I'd set up with my guide a couple of weeks before I got to Chile. Always have a plan B. Hopefully you don't need it, but if you do, it'll be there for you. Number 2, be patient and shoot at the right time. Now, time, of course, plays a very important role in travel photography, well, in all photography. But in travel photography, it's more than just shooting during the golden hour or the blue hour. It's looking for those moments when the light and the composition and a unique action come together to create decisive moment. 3 things: composition, light, and action. Let me give you a couple of examples. This first one is sort of obvious. So I was in Tanzania. I was staying in a cabin on the shore of the Zambezi River, about a mile upstream from the Victoria Falls. I have to show you this awesome room. I got this room. I gave it to myself for Christmas, a little upgrade here. It's really cool, but it's on the Zambezi River, and so I'll step out here to the patio, and then I just want to show you my view here. Check this out. During the day, I played with some options for framing the river with the trees. So I was focused on composition, the first of those 3 things. And you can see these daytime shots aren't impressive, but I knew if I just waited for sunset, I would get something decent. So I had the first of the 3 things. So while I was waiting for the sun to go down, I noticed boats taking tourists up to the falls. And they were going up and down the river and passing my cabin about every 15 minutes or so. And at the time, I didn't think much of it. I was just a little bit annoyed at the noise that they were making, disturbing my peace. But finally, sunset did arrive, and I was able to capture this image. It's a nice image. It's a river with a sunset in the background. So we have two of the three things. We have composition and we have light. But we needed three things for decisive moment. I had no action. So I just needed to wait for one of those boats to pass, and I thought then I would have a story. I would have a boat traversing the river in the golden light of sunset. And so by just waiting a few minutes, I was able to make one of my favorite images from Tanzania. Henry Cartier-Bresson taught us that decisive moment is everything. It's not just luck. It's creating an interesting composition. It's finding the light, and then it's waiting to capture some specific action. Let me give you another example of this. I spend a lot of time in Paris, and while I'm there, I usually stay in the same hotel. One of my favorite little hotels. They have this room that I really love. It's a great corner room on the first floor. Now, one of the bad things about that room is that there's this bus stop right outside. So about every 30 minutes or so, a bus arrives to pick up passengers, and it's a little bit noisy. But a lot of those passengers will sit on the outside on the windowsill while they're waiting for the bus. And so from the inside of my room through that frosted glass, I can see the shape and the light coming in, and sometimes it makes some interesting scenes. And I realized I could zoom in, I could eliminate the windowsill, eliminate the room, create a nice composition, and then I would just need the other two things. I just would need some nice light, and I would need some kind of action to get decisive moment. And one day that happened. It was a nice rainy day, and the light was perfect. So I set up my camera, zoomed in, and I waited. And eventually people started showing up in rain suits and umbrellas, and I was able to make some great photos. So once again, look for composition, set that up, wait for the light. Once those two things are there, then anticipate the action. Those three things will align and you'll get some spectacular photos. Number 3, take a tripod. You'll give yourself a lot more options. Now, I promise I'm going to get into specific gear recommendations in just a second. But I've learned that there's one piece of gear that's essential, and I'm mentioning it here because it's one piece of gear that most people pack last, and it should be something that you pack first. You need a tripod. Now, this tripod doesn't have to be a $600 Gitzo tripod. In fact, the tripod that I use most in my travels is this little Coleman right here. And this is a tripod that, honestly, I bought it on a whim, I think in a little camera shop somewhere in Ecuador. But I've used this to make time-lapse videos and to take selfies and to create long exposures. I've used it as a handle for vlogging. I've used it for a light stand and a microphone stand and more. I've used this constantly. A tripod is going to give you more options for shooting at night. You'll be able to use lower ISO values, and you can do long exposures. You can just do a lot more things if you bring a tripod than you can without it. Number 4. Look for unusual perspectives. One of the keys to interesting travel photography is being able to show familiar places from an unfamiliar perspective. Now, we've all seen photos of the Grand Canyon and Times Square and Santorini and Machu Picchu and the normal list. So if you're going to one of those places, go ahead and get the iconic shot that you want to get. But then point your camera in a different direction. Now, when I was at Machu Picchu, I did exactly what everybody else does. I got up super early in the morning and I got a standard sunrise photo from the sun grate, the same photo that you've seen a million times. So I could say, yes, I've been to Machu Picchu, I've got the photo, I'll check that off my list. But then I realized I'd never seen the valley where Machu Picchu is situated. So after I finished photographing the ruins, I turned my camera in a new direction. I pointed my lens to the peaks that surrounded Machu Picchu so that I could show it in context to tell a more complete story. In Ho Chi Minh, I went out and I was photographing the people on the street food and the chaos of city life. These photos that are okay. It's nothing that we haven't seen before. But when I returned to my hotel, I was looking out from my balcony from a few stories up. I think I was on the 8th floor, something like that. And I was noticing that all these families were on bicycles, not just 1 or 2 or 3 people, but sometimes 4 or 5. They were moving through the city streets and there were all these bicycles. And so I took my camera and I pointed it in a different direction. I shot straight down and I was able to show a completely new perspective to the daily life of the people in this great Vietnamese city. Nobody knows a place better than a local. They'll be able to take you to places that tourists don't normally go, and you'll see culture from their perspective. And that's going to pay off. You'll be able to photograph things that other photographers haven't seen. You're probably going to have some fantastic meals and make some great friends. Locals can take you to authentic restaurants, they can show you hidden treasures, and they can guide you to the most colorful places. And a local's also going to help keep you safe. Not only are they going to help you to know where that you should go, they're going to tell you where you should not go. So that's going to help you to understand how to avoid local scams and how you can move about the city safely so that somebody doesn't maybe lift your camera or your telephone or a few extra dollars from your pocket. Now, when I'm looking for a local, I tend to skip the tour groups and the agencies and the pamphlets that are in the hotel lobby, those kind of things, because they normally do the touristy things that everybody else does. And so I use some other tools. The first is one that's available to everybody, social media, obviously. And so when I'm headed to a city or a place, will say, hey, I'm headed to Patagonia, I'm headed to Ushuaia, I'm headed to Mexico City, I'm going to this place. Is there anybody there that wants to meet up, have coffee, talk, let's go, can you help me understand your city? And that's a huge help. That works most of the time, and you'll meet some really wonderful people. I also try to find locals using Show Around. It's a handy little app that connects travelers with locals. It's a free app, and you can download that. And you can say, hey, I'm in this place, and I'm looking for this person to show me these types of things, and then you pay them for showing you around. But these are just locals showing you around, and so thus the name Show Around. That tends to work great in larger cities. It's not so great for places like going through the jungle or in forests, or if you're doing wildlife stuff, Show Around doesn't work. So that's a sort of a city thing. There's another place that I go. I spend a lot of time on Horizons Unlimited Bulletin Board, or Hub. And it is the gold standard for connecting with other travelers, meeting locals, getting advice, and it's an invaluable resource for planning any trip. It was created by adventure travelers, specifically adventure motorcycle travelers, but it is sort of grown to include all types of travelers. So check that out. Again, links in the description of this video. All that stuff is free, and so you can use that. All right, it's time to talk about gear. Now, I'm going to break this down into several different categories, and these are things that have worked for me over the years. They might not necessarily work for you. Remember, there is no perfect setup. In fact, the stuff I started using when I was backpacking around the world, I don't use any of it now. So I've replaced 100% of the stuff I started with, and everything has changed. So as technology changes, so is your gear strategy. As your space changes, so is your gear strategy. As the mode of transportation changes, so is your gear strategy. That's okay. What I recommend is that you use the gear that works for you today on your current travels, and then update that as technology changes or circumstances change. So I'm going to show you, we're going to start out by showing you the stuff that I use on almost all of my travel photography and videos. This is the stuff that I use. If you've seen a video that I've made in the last 6 years or stuff, this is the stuff that I've been using. And one of the things that you're going to notice right away is none of this gear is the latest and greatest. There are new versions of every single thing. I think of every single thing I'm about to show you, there are newer versions of that. And the reason for that is I don't have the budget to update all of my gear every year or every 2 or 3 years. So what I do is I try to buy the absolute best gear that I can afford, and then I count on that to last a long, long time. As a matter of fact, this lens right here I've had for over 25 years. And I bought it used, if you can believe that. So I buy the best I can afford, and then I count on it to last me a long, long time. And if it breaks, I fix it, and then I keep using it until it's destroyed. So let's start out by the MVPs, the most valuable players. And because I make a lot of YouTube videos, these are sort of video specific, but we'll start with this guy right here. This is the Osmo Pocket. I bought this, the first version of this, when it first came out. I was in Istanbul. There was a little store that had them, and I bought it on a whim. I thought it would be sort of gimmicky, and I thought I could make a video with it. This is a camera that I have used, I think, every single day since I bought the very first one. I think it was in 2019. So for the last 6 years, I've used this little camera. Now this is great because it's a tiny camera that you can do stills with, you can do video with. You've got a little thing that attaches there that you can do. You can attach it to your phone and remote control it. There's a wireless mic that you can use. It's an all-in-one thing. Now this is the version 2. There's now a version 3 that's even better. It has more options than this guy right here. But I absolutely love this. I think this is the best camera that I've purchased in the last probably 20 years. It's fantastic. And the other camera that I use that goes with that is this. This is an Osmo Action. And I have this inside of a fully metal cage. This is a small rig cage because it needs to be really durable. I use this when I'm mounting it outside of my Land Rover or on my motorcycle, or if I'm doing scuba diving, something where I need a weatherproof camera. The Osmo Action is what I use. I use it for B-roll shots. I use it for time-lapse photography. I use it for all kinds of things. And you can see that it's got a little magnetic clip. Clip it on the front, on the side. It does vertical, horizontal. So these two cameras, there's a video that I made in Patagonia of me and Eileen Martinez riding through Patagonia on our motorcycles. We shot the entire thing with 2 Osmo Pockets and a couple of Osmo Actions. And I think we didn't use any other cameras for that entire thing. And it was shown in film festivals and all kinds of stuff. The other thing I have is a drone. Now, I started with a Mavic and I crashed that. And then I didn't want to spend a lot of money. So I bought this little guy. This is an Air 2S. Again, this isn't the most recent. I think now they're on the Air 3 or Air 4S, something like that. This is a great drone. It does 4K, it does hyperlapse, all that kind of stuff. So get the drone that you can afford. Almost any DJI drone is a spectacular drone. So whatever works for you. The one thing I will recommend though, I will recommend that you get a dedicated remote. So this one doesn't need a phone to be attached to it. What I found with all the drones that I've used, because I tend to be working in tropical areas, in deserts, and really hot places, what happens is when I'm trying to get my phone connected to the remote that comes with the drone, it's so hot that the screen on the phone dims so it doesn't overheat, and in the bright sun, I cannot see what I'm doing, and it takes a long time. So for me, if I see something and I'm traveling, I want to get to it right away. So a dedicated remote will allow you better transmission rates, by the way, so you can fly the drone farther, and you can turn it on and get up and running much quicker. And then the screens are much brighter. They don't dim in the bright sunlight. So if you're working in the tropics, if you're going to bright places, deserts, things like that, get the dedicated controller. It's absolutely worth it. Okay, let's talk about the still cameras that I use. And again, remember, I'm doing this full time. This is my career, so I've made some choices that most people wouldn't make. So I started when I was backpacking. I had a 5D Mark III, I believe, a 24-70 and a 70-200. I think that was the gear that I had. It was incredibly heavy, and that large camera, a DSLR camera, this is a mirrorless, but it tended to gather crowds. People would see that, especially when I was in Southeast Asia and India and parts of South America. People would see that camera and they would want to come and see it and look at it. A lot of eyes were on it. In a coffee shop, people would look at it. So I just didn't like that. So one of the things that I have done is years ago, I switched. So I think in 2015, I switched to all Leica camera, a Leica M240. This is now a Leica M10, and prime lenses. And for me, this works out much better. So there's no crowd. most people that see this camera see it and think it's a film camera. It's an old camera. And because it's so tiny and there's, you know, these prime lenses, it's not intimidating. So when I'm doing street photography or if I'm doing portraits, urban portraits, I can just get right up close to people and I can zip around subways and all that kind of stuff without worrying about people looking at the camera and wanting to maybe steal it. And a lot of people online have said, anybody that sees a Leica is going to know what it is and they're going to steal that. In my experience, outside of the photography community, nobody knows what a Leica is. And so a lot of people will put a piece of tape over the red dot or whatever. That's never been a concern for me. So with my Leica, the lens that I use almost every single day is a 35mm prime. So that works great for me for doing street photography, for doing portrait work, for doing environmental portraits, for doing food photography, all that kind of stuff. And then the other lens that's used probably most is my 50mm lens. So I use this when I'm doing any kind of portrait work in the studio, that kind of stuff. I also have a 21 and a 28. I use this all of the time. Now, when the Canon R5 was released, I did grab one. And so this is my Canon R5. I use it without a battery grip. And then I'm using a 24-105 lens. That gives me essentially all of these lenses and a lot more in one very, very nice lens. And that's what I would suggest. If you do have a mirrorless camera, an R5, or if you got a Nikon or Fujifilm or a Sony, get a zoom lens that's that similar range, 24-105-ish, because that's going to give you most of the options that you need for travel photography. I used to shoot with a 24-70 2.8L on my Canon. I absolutely loved that, but this is the new version. This is an f4 instead of an f2.8, but it works for me most of the time. I used this lens and this camera for shooting the protests in Colombia when I was riding around and sort of documenting all of that stuff. And so I'll put links to those videos in the description of this one so you can sort of see what I'm talking about. All right, the other thing that I think is needed is you might need a long lens. We're going to talk about long lenses when we talk about scenic photography. So I'm just going to put that to the side. This is my 70-200. I've used this a lot. I used longer lenses for some other things. We're going to get to that. This is something that I've used all over the world. You can see that it is pretty beat up and it's got some road wear. This is my travel tripod. This is a carbon fiber Benro tripod and it's got a ball head. This is fantastic. This has been all over the world with me. It's not super heavy. I've put it on my motorcycle. I even had this on my backpack. This is what I've used to use as a video tripod. I've used this as a still camera tripod. This is absolutely something that you should have in your bag if you can fit it in there. And then of course, I already talked about my tiny tripod that I've used quite a bit. I highly recommend getting one of these. It's, I think, 45 bucks, something like that. It's absolutely worth it. And then for video work, for years, I had a couple of these little Nanlite panels that are battery powered. You can plug them into a wall outlet. They're fantastic. But then recently, LED technology has changed dramatically. So now, over the past 6 months or so, I have changed to these. This is the Zhiyun Molus X100, and it is fantastic. It's got a little kit that you can buy. It's got a battery that you pop on there. This can use a normal reflector. Stick this guy on here. It's much, much brighter than those light panels, and it's modular. So it comes in a kit that you can have AC or battery. You can remote control this from your phone. You can change color temperatures. So you can see this is really, really bright. This is much, much, much brighter than those light panels. And you can even do things like have this little tiny, I absolutely love this thing. This is a little tiny softbox that you just blunk. Now you got a softbox that turns on. And so for video light, this is what I'm using now. So it's a Molus, it's an X100. It's fantastic. It's very, very affordable. You can just throw that in your bag and it works just great. Let's talk about scenic photography. Now, when I started doing scenic photography, I'm a portrait photographer, but when I started doing scenic photography, what I thought was use a wide angle lens all the time. And that works if you have nice foreground interest, something that brings you into the scene. Things like these fields in Vietnam. Wide-angle lenses work great for those types of photos. But if you're doing anything, trying to shoot distant mountains and vistas and that type of photography, you need a long lens. And so I've used this. This is my 70-200. I used to have a Leica 135mm prime. Well, right here I'm at a perfect place to use my 135mm lens, and I'm so glad I brought this, because with the 50 it's just a little bit too wide, but this is a perfect scenario to use this lens. You can hear my bronchitis is kicking in here a little bit. Ah, this is spectacular. I'm shooting at 1/1500th of a second, so there's really no need to use a tripod. The other thing that's going to be great are lenses like this 21. It's got a manual, it's manual focusing, and it also has a focus guide that is really easy to set so you know where hyperfocal is. So if you're shooting a lot of stuff where you have foreground interest, you have maybe fields of flowers, or you have tea fields, those types of things, hyperfocal is something that you really need to be able to do. And so a lot of newer lenses don't have any focus guide at all. It's all autofocus or manual focus with no guide to show you where hyperfocal is. And so for me, manual focus lenses with focal guides are key. And you can get those for almost any brand of camera. Sometimes you need to get an older lens. Now, Fujifilm's got some fantastic lenses for that. Third-party manufacturers have fantastic lenses for that. So check those out, but I love prime lenses for scenic photography. If you're thinking about going on safari, or if you're going out to photograph condors in the Andes Mountains, doing wildlife photography, you need some really, really long lenses. Lions don't like it when you walk up to them and say hello, and so you need something that you can shoot from a safe distance. This is a Nikon D800 with a 200 to 500mm lens. I've used this lens. This is a 70-200mm lens. I used this when I was photographing birds in the Galapagos. Perfect, here he comes. And that's how, oh, look at this guy. Honestly, at 200mm, it just wasn't long enough for a lot of different things. And so I don't own a lens that's longer than 200mm. If that's you, I suggest a few things. The first is maybe get a teleconverter. So you can put that on the back of your camera. Your 200mm lens now becomes a 400mm lens. You can rent long lenses. That's the best option. So when I'm talking about long lenses, I'm talking about 600mm lenses with a teleconverter, maybe 1200mm lenses, 500mm lenses, really, really long lenses. You can rent in the United States, and then most rental places will ship that to you in a Pelican case. That's great for throwing on an airplane, throwing in the back of a Land Rover or a Jeep, and going to the place you need to go to those safaris. In a lot of places, specifically in South Africa, there are a ton of rental places where you can rent lenses for a week or a month or a weekend. And so that's going to save you a ton of money instead of spending, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars for these highly specialized lenses. If you're not doing this every day for your full-time job, rent the lens that you need, get the shot, and then bring it back. Now, the other thing that I suggest that you do is if you're going to a remote location, if you're going out to the outback, if you're going into some canyon lands, if you're going into extreme desert, if you're going, you know, on safari, hire a guide that knows where they're going, because they're going to be able to take you to that new location. They're going to be able to take you safe. And a lot of those guides also have lenses to rent. That's what I did when I was in South Africa. Joining me is Elsa Hoffman. She is the owner and operator of Photo Tours Cape Town in Cape Town, South Africa. We're now going on a nature walk. We're on this thing. We're gonna go see lions. Well, before we get going too far, this is Dion, and he is the guide today. He's driving us all over the place and making sure that we're safe. The other thing to consider, this is what I learned when I was shooting the big five in Africa, lions, tigers, zebras, that kind of stuff. I needed multiple camera bodies. There was not enough time to have my camera and change it from a 500 millimeter lens down to, I think, a 35 millimeter lens. In fact, that happened to me. You can see this when I was photographing these elephants in South Africa. So I'm making sure to listen to Dion because I don't want to do something that's not smart, because these are wild animals. Okay, I've been told to get the hell out of here. So, okay. He is not liking me. Wow. I'm shooting with a 35 millimeter lens. Having multiple camera bodies and multiple lenses is really going to be essential if you're doing any kind of serious wildlife photography, because animals are unpredictable. If you're doing street photography or documentary style work, then I recommend using wide angle lenses. Now I'm using prime lenses here, you can see that. If you don't have those, then I recommend using a 24-70 f2.8 lens. That's made for Canon and Sony and Fujifilm and just almost any brand, or something pretty darn close to that. It's almost the perfect lens because you have the 24 end of the lens is really nice and wide. You can zoom in to 70, that's perfect for doing portraits and things like that. And at 2.8, you're letting in enough light to shoot in lower light situations and you get nice bokeh. Now I also have on this camera here, I've got a 24-105, but it's an f4. And for me, if I'm doing street photography, I really want to be able to direct the viewer's eye into the thing that I find most interesting. And I normally do that with shallow depth of field. So for me, f4 is just not wide enough. I am consistently shooting with my Leica lenses at f2 or f1.4. I have a lens here that I shoot at, I believe it's 1.9. And so I've got some really wide, fast lenses. I love those lenses to be able to show things in low light and to direct the viewer's eye using shallow depth of field. I also like to shoot with a small camera. Now the reason for that is with a small lens and a small camera, you can approach people, you can get right up close and personal, and they're just not intimidated by that. So you can get up and start photographing things and people in the street. People don't really pay attention to that. However, if you've got a larger camera, and if you have a battery grip on that and you're zipping around shooting, this tends to cause people some consternation. They don't like having a big lens pointed at their face. So it's up to you. I like to use wider lenses, smaller cameras. I am a disciple of James Noctway and Robert Capa. Robert Capa famously said, if your photos aren't good enough, you're not close enough. So I like to be very close. I like to get right in there. Now that doesn't have to be the way that you do it. So a friend of mine, Gavin Hoey, and I, years ago, we did a head-to-head photo challenge doing street photography in Brighton Beach. And Gavin tended to use longer lenses and be really stealthy and take photos of people without them knowing. Whereas I was using a 35 millimeter lens, sometimes my 50 millimeter lens, walking right up to people, engaging with them, pointing the camera right in their face from just a couple of feet away and taking those photos. We got drastically different results. Both approaches are valid, but for me, because I studied James Noctway for so long, so many years, actually was able to meet him and talk to him and to look at the work of Robert Capa, I tend to use wide angle lenses and get in close. In fact, the lens that I started using for street photography and documentary work was this one. This is a 16-35 millimeter lens. It's incredibly wide and you have to be really close to fill the frame and get some amazing images using that. Let's talk just for a moment about staying safe while you're traveling. Now, the steps that you need to take really depend on the type of photography and the places that you're going. If you're going to go into a conflict area, you're going to need a totally different plan than if you're going to Paris. And so these are some things that I have done and used over the years when I've been traveling. And so take what you will from this. There are links in the description of this video so you can click and sort of learn a little bit more about each of the things I'm about to tell you. So the first one is consider getting travel health insurance. If you break a bone, if something happens to you, your appendix bursts, something like that, where you need to go to the hospital or you need, even worse, you need a medical evacuation, those flights can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so if you don't have the proper travel insurance, it can bankrupt you. So spend a couple $100s to get some travel insurance, medical insurance, and specifically the type that will allow you to have an evacuation. That is key if you're going into the jungles or some remote place where there is the potential that you might need a rescue. If you're hiking somewhere, if you're climbing a mountain, those types of things, get the insurance. It's a couple $100s, but it could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in the future. The other thing that I recommend is something like this. And so I have used this for many, many years. This is my, I think, second version of this. There's a newer one. This is called a Garmin inReach. It's a satellite communicator. It's not the same as the satellite on your phone. If you have a satellite connection on the newer iPhones, I think all have satellite connections. This is different. This is more powerful. What you can do with this is you can broadcast your location to the world, to the public, or what I do is when I'm in a remote area where I think I'm at risk, like when I was in Mongolia or I was in Eastern Russia, when I was in the jungles down in the Amazon, when I was in conflict areas, I had this on and it was updating my location, and I had people who knew where I was going, when I should be getting to where I was going, and when I was going to be coming back. They were watching. And so if at any time things were going astray, they would know that something had happened, and then they could call in some help to come and get me out of that. The other thing what these have is on the side, they have a little button that you can push, and it will, it's called the SOS button. It will call for help. And so Garmin is connected to a network of different rescue organizations. And so it's essentially calling 911 in the middle of nowhere. They'll get helicopters or they'll get search guys or whatever they need to do to get to you to get help. I have used this several times to call for help for other people when places that there's just no cell coverage at all. I've been able to get help to people that have broken down, had car accidents, things like that. Fortunately, I've never had to use it for myself, but this is really invaluable. The other thing you can do with this is you can do two-way communication. And so I did use this in Mongolia. I was stuck in a storm, rivers were rising, and I just couldn't get out. And so I used that to help map a way out and to get back into Russia and save myself from a lot of trouble. The other thing is to have a team tracking you. So if you're doing any kind of hiking or trekking or going into conflict areas, make sure that you tell people where you're going, when you're going to be back, all that kind of stuff, so that people know if you go missing and they can get to you quickly, they can help and rescue you from that. So make sure you have a plan, share it with others, just like you would if you're going hiking or any of those types of things locally. The other thing that I've learned to do is to store my documents, my passport, driver's license, bank information, that kind of stuff. I've scanned that and I store it on a safe place online in the cloud. So I will encrypt that, password protect it, and I put it on Dropbox. That way, if I lose my credit card or my passport, I can go online, download a PDF file, print it out, go to the embassy or email it to whoever I need to email it to start the process of getting replacements for that. I have had to replace countless credit cards because I've left them in ATMs or just lost them. I've had that happen several times. Now you have electronic credit cards on your phone. It's not such a big deal. But if you do lose your passport, it can be a nightmare. So store those documents online. It could help you a lot. Well, thanks so much for watching this video about travel photography. Now, this is a very broad topic, and so you probably have some questions that I didn't answer, or maybe some clarification. So leave those questions in the comments of this video so I can look at that and try to get you the information that you need. Maybe we need to come back and do a follow-up video about something specific to travel photography that's maybe just street photography or just wildlife photography or something like that. Also, don't forget, there are links in the description of this video. Those links are going to give you more information so you can take a deeper dive to learn about things like the Garmin InReach or the different lenses that I talk about, travel insurance, things like that. So make sure that you check out those links. It's going to provide you even more information than I was able to put into this video. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, all the good stuff, and I'll see you in the next video.